Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you a full demo of the Fly-deno framework. But before I start, I would like to walk you through the folder structure of the framework. Now, focuses on simplicity, and due to that, it has only two folders in each root. It has a public folder and the LCLC folder. It also has two files, which are the fly and the index.ts. Now, the public folder is where all our front-end files live. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, this is where they live. Now, the SRC folder is where most of the backend code and the application itself live. We'll come back to this later. Now, Fly, it's a command line tool for running the application. It uses the Deno bin. And we also have index.ts. So index.ts is basically the entry point of the application. So this is what's called when the application is being run. So over here we have a port, setting a port of 8,000. So we are basically telling the application to run on this port, and we are doing this is basically a very simple thing. That so basically what the developer has to do is just to come here and assign a port to the application, and the application will just pick it up and run. All these will be auto-generated for the user in future. So the SRC folder. So the SRC folder has two folders and a file. Now the app folder is where the developer writes all his code. So his controllers, routes, models. This is where the developer will write most of his code here. And this is the artisan. There is an artisan folder. This is where most of the backend logic lives. So, for instance, we have an include folder which contains a whole lot of files. So we have a custom server. So a custom server to communicate with a server and get certain things like set render count, persist data, get render data, and so on. I also have interface.ts. So interface.ts basically defines the shape of the route. So over here, I'm exporting the interface, and I'm saying the name of the route should be it should be a name, there should be path and a handler, and the name should be optional. And so I have lib.ts. Now lib.ts is a simple file. This file basically reads the environment variable. So Fly makes use of a Laravel-like environment variable. So this file, when you run the app, this code reads the environment variable and sets them so that the user can access them everywhere in the application. And we have the render.ts. The render.ts, there's a file that helps with the rendering, render files in the browser. So it takes a template name, object, and props, just like React. You do a lot of things. Basically, I wouldn't go much into this. I'll come to this later in the video. Now that we know the folder structure and where to build our app, let's begin by building a very simple web application with a framework. So we just move into the SRC folder, and inside the app, this is where we write most of our backend logic. So we have the app, we have controller models. Now the controller folder is where we define our controllers. The model is where we define our model. So the model is just something that helps us communicate to the database and pull data. So it kind of works with the controller. So get the data and pass it on to the controller. The controller passes it on to the view. So we have our route folder. The route folder contains all our routes in the application. So for now we are using a get route. So get.json. If I'm making a post request, we'll have to go to the post.json. If I'm making a put request, we'll have to go to the put.json, delete.json. Or the reason for this is that we want to reduce time complexity, because we don't want the application to go through a whole bunch of files before it can find certain endpoints. So if we are making a delete request, the application just has to go to just one file, point it to just one file, and it erase the file. Yes, so that's it. Yes, and there's an environment variable. Yes, this is what I was talking about earlier. So this environment variable. So if I build an application and want to store certain confidential information like database name, database ports, hosts, API keys and all those things. You don't want to expose these things to the application or anyone. So what you do is you store them in an environment variable and call them in the application. So Fly makes uses a Laravel type of environment variable, and over here you just define your environment variable, and when you run the application, the framework will just set these values in the environment variable, and you can access them everywhere in the code. So there is also an environment, an m.example. So this one, I mean, when we push this code to GitHub, the .m wouldn't be added. So over here, basically, we use a .m.example for production purpose. So that's where you define your production API key, production host, and everything. So that's when you run the application on local host, you can just point it to the .m, but when you're in production, just point it to the .m.example. Yeah, so we are going to build a simple application, and the first place I have to go is a route. So over here, I have to define the route and the route of my application. So it's just like this, just follow this path. So I'm going to copy this one. Then, so I'm going to name it. Okay, let me give it fly. Then I will say if I go to this endpoint, fly home, it should go to this controller and call this method. Now I'm going to create a new class, which is fly demo. Then inside the class, I'll say call the home method. So the first one is a class name, and the second one is a method that will be called when I hit this endpoint. Okay, so now this is a controller. So now I have to go to my controller and create this controller inside the controller file. So I have to controller is over here. So I'm going to create this controller with this name. The name of the controller should be the same as what you've written here. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to name it Fly-demo. No, sorry, let me just delete it. Fly-demo.ts. Yeah, that's it. Now, so now our routes. So this one corresponds to this. So Fly-demo. Okay. So inside the Fly-demo, we define our class name. So first of all, we export. I mean, these things will be auto-generated for the user. So Fly-demo. Yes. So there's a class. And I'm going to define a function or a method home. Now, home takes a request of type server request, which has been imported. So again, these things will be auto-generated by the framework in future. So there will be a command line utility for generating all these things. So you just have to pass your class name in the terminal to generate all these files for you. Okay. So now that we are done creating this file and this class, we are going to. What we have to do is to return something in the controller. Now the controller uses a JSON form of routing. A JSON form of it just returns a JSON data, so something like this. So yeah, so it returns a template and a data. Now the template over here is the name of the file we want to render in the browser. So let me create a new file called fly.something. Then I'll pass something like fly demo as data to the framework. Okay. Now we've created our class, we've created our routes. What is left with right now is to create the template. So the application points this one. So when you run this one, the application searches into the public folder and see whether there is a file called fly.hbs. So when it doesn't see any file, it throws an error. So when you're going into the public folder and you're going to create a file called fly.hbs. Use the .handlebar extension. So I'm going to create fly.hbs. That's it. And I'm going to get a simple HTML file. HTML. All right. So that's what we have. So we are in the controller. So this is a controller. Now we've created the fly.h fly.adbs file. So when we run the app will look, when you hit this, when you hit fly home endpoint, it goes into the fly demo controller, which is this one, and it calls this method, which is this method over here. Now, when it calls this method also has a return statement. So this method returns a template and a data. And the template is the name of the file, which is what we've created over here. So what we are going to do is, now the template doesn't return only the file, it returns a data, which is this one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to interpolate this data into our view. So inside the body, I'm going to define an h1 tag, and I'm going to say this is, then I'll use the mustard template syntax to get the value. So data, that's the name of the data. That's data, name of the object. Now inside the object there is a title. So I'm going to tap on the title to get, yes, something like this. Yes. So that's it. We are done. So when I run the app, I should see this data being injected into this one. So it's going to be, this is a fly_demo. So let's run the app. Now to run the app, like I said, I have a command line utility for running the application. So fly is there. So you just run the application with sh fly and hit enter. Now the application is running on port 8000. So we will just go to our routes, and over here we are saying you should hit, when we hit this endpoint, you should do something. So we're going to hit, we are going to the browser and we'll hit this endpoint, and we see whether it will return this file. Okay. Now in the browser, so we'll go to localhost port 8000 fly_demo. Hit enter. So as you can see, we are seeing this is a fly demo. This fly_demo. Let me tack on another. Let me add more values, more this into it. So maybe title name, maybe author or developer. Isaac. Maybe school, Ashese University. Then I will do supervisor, Prof. Todd Oren. Yeah, so I have these values. Title, that's flight_demo. Let me make it demo. Fly-deno. Yeah, developer as a Kumi school, Ashese, supervisor, Prof. Todd Warren. So I'm going to restart the server and run the application again. So, okay, let me shut down the server and call these values inside the view. So I'm going to copy and paste this. So let me say developer is, so data dots developer, and this should be supervisor, should be data dot supervisor. Then there is, let me check again, school, there is school, so data dot school, so uni, let's make it school, yes. And let me just change the title to title. So framework. All right. So the framework, the title, developer, supervisor is cool. All right. So let me restart the server and see what happened. So run on port 8000. I go to port 8000. We hit /home endpoint. Enter. Let's see. Ooh. So the framework Fly-deno developer is a Kumi, Prof. Todd Warren, Ashesi University. So yes, so all this data is being injected by the framework. So this will be, so we pass this into the controller, and the controller will send it to the view. So there is a handlebar engine that processes this data and sends it to the view. Let me just show you the server. So the main challenge I face with this framework, well, the main challenge though, like it got me thinking a lot. I was, so after I tried rendering, passing data to the view, and I realized everything was working. I tried to render a page with images and CSS files. And I realized when I hit the endpoint, it doesn't load the images and CSS along. So what I did was I created a CSS, something like a custom CSS library. It's not a library, but just something to help me point the application to where the CSS and the JavaScript live. So I think in the artisan, and inside the artisan utility and include rather vendor.ts. Yes. So I created this trigger renders method. Oh, it's not in the class. Yeah. This function. I created this function. Now, what this function does is it just get the host, concat the host to the assets in the public folder, gets point JavaScript to the JavaScript folder, point images to the images folder, and point all assets to the asset folder. So after this, it will use a template, handover template engine to pass it to the view. So in the view, I did a similar thing here, index.hbs. So in the view, all that you have to do is just pass on this variable and it will point. So over here, I'm just saying point this thing to set the image directory as your entry directory and get me this file. Same applies to this. Over here, we see CSS there. So it is pointing this one to the CSS directory inside the public, and it is getting the CSS file, loading the CSS file along with the images and all. And I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless you.